Okay people, so we finally reached the end of Jujutsu Kaisen's manga with chapter 271 that dropped officially in North America September 29th, 2024. And I know the community has had a wide variety of reactions to the ending and how they felt about it and what they thought about everything that transpired and just in general how it wrapped itself up. But I personally have my own take on things, and for better or worse, however you want to feel about it, so be it. But this is what I think and how I feel about Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 271, wrapping up the entirety of the series and the story. Subscribe and hit that bell to get more. First and foremost, the chapter, a good chunk of it revolves around a reunion mission, so to speak, between Nobara, Yuji, and Megumi. Essentially, there's a dude that is cursed and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And immediately for me personally, going from all of the latest arcs that we've had, the last saga, the culling games, the serious nature of what we just came out of, fighting Sukuna for endless amounts of chapters, feeling like the situation is entirely hopeless. Jujutsu Kaisen has always been horror shonen type of battle series or whatnot, so it's always had that serious dire element to it. But especially over the last few years, from Sukuna taking Megumi's body, everything that transpired, the series definitely felt like it was getting even more intense, more edgier, more grittier, and just in general more of a hopeless situation. So for all of that to transpire and finally we get a kind of quote-unquote normal moment, take it back to how the series began, where it was just these three kids that was on a mission, which it's a little bit more than just these three kids on a mission, because you know it's a little bit scary regardless. But I was personally very happy and satisfied with getting something of a reunion, so to speak, or just taking it back to how it all began with Jujutsu Kaisen, of course minus Gojo. So getting that mission, the jokes between Nobara and Yuji, just in general the camaraderie. For me, I was very happy and excited also to just see the characters smiling again. Like, let's not forget that again, these characters have been going through it, on top of the fact that Nobara was removed from the series for like 100 chapters or something crazy. Like, she's been gone an extremely long time. It's been so long since we just had the main three MCs of Jujutsu Kaisen just having a decent time, even if they're on a mission to do something that involves cursed spirits. And eventually, after a couple of goofs and gabs that had me there a little bit smiling, ultimately they're able to resolve the situation where basically a dude was upset because he bought an expensive purse for a girl and she really wasn't into him like that. And I was just kind of like, that is so Gege, putting in that kind of awkward, I guess you would call it, comedy in these moments. Like, Gege rarely does that, but when they do it, like for example Maki sumo wrestling in the middle of the culling game, stuff like that, I always appreciate those random moments, and Gege did it pretty well for me. And personally, I think that was a great subversive move opposed to just doing the norm, because this final chapter and everything that it entailed, sure, it helped to wrap up certain aspects and certain character arcs and all of that stuff, but just in general, it didn't feel like it was necessarily being tied down to the Shonen Jump formula entirely, where, you know, you would normally get like there's two big time skips and then the series wraps up and this one gets married, that one gets married. It seemed like Gege just wanted to focus in on, okay, they went through these horrible missions, they went through these horrible times, they're all kind of back together again, they're reminiscing on certain aspects, certain characters are coming to conclusions within themselves. It kind of felt like it was more character centric, where Jujutsu Kaisen for a while now has been more focused in on kind of the battle aspects. Getting back to the essence of the series was great, and in a lot of those character arc wrap-ups, there was that kind of conversation that Yuji had with Gojo, and hearing what Gojo's last words to Yuji was before everything transpired in his battle against Sukuna, which I felt was really awesome and worked very well in unison with the previous two things that he had said to Nobara and Megumi as his final goodbye letters, of him kind of joking with Megumi like, yo dog, I did your pops in my fault G, and then with Nobara telling her about how he found her mom and stuff like that. So finally getting Yuji in his final conversation was definitely something that fans were looking forward to, and I ain't gonna lie, that was the most emotional part of the chapter and had me very much so in my feels when I recorded a very long version of my wrap-up of Jujutsu Kaisen, which will be available at some point down the road, so look forward to that. I got really freaking emotional. I was very much so invested in it because some of my favorite parts of Jujutsu Kaisen, especially early on, was again some of the more subversive aspects of even training that Gege Akutami did. Like, the training that Yuji had was so different than the average Shonen Jump main character and what they go through. Hey, stand under a waterfall and learn Rasen Shuriken. Hey, cut a boulder and have, like, there's so many different elements of training that I've seen in Shonen Jump battle series to get something that at face value some might say like, really, that's training? Yuji watching movies as Gojo is there, like, you know, kind of egging him on and whatnot. But ultimately I felt like that was just such a different take on how to kind of build up a character, get them a little more alert to certain situations and how to react to certain situations. Kind of even the overall, outside of just the story in general, the idea and the concept of how there's only certain amount of ways that a story could go. I felt that that was brilliant, and Gege Akutami executed doing something totally different that, again, some might say like, that's ridiculous, that couldn't possibly be training. And yet our boy Yuji Itadori was a monster and kept on getting stronger because of it. So to remember all of those moments, the camaraderie between Yuji and Gojo and everything that they've been through, and kind of finally have this wrap-up conversation that they had, it really hit the feels. And even more so where Gojo is talking to Yuji and telling him like, yo, I just wanted, even if it's just one person, to forget me. Like, eventually if I go out, because this was of course during the time that he was fighting Sukuna, he's like, even if I go out like this, everybody eventually will outgrow me and surpass what I am right now. But if one person at least could forget about me, I'd be happy with that. And he wanted Yuji to forget about him. And honestly, as you read the chapter and you notice that Yuji is the only one that is actually thinking about Gojo, it really hits even stronger of a message of like, he wanted only one person to forget about him, but it seemed like everybody else kind of had forgotten about him. Nobody else was talking about him, mourning him. Only Yuji's the one there, you know, his kind of, I would argue, best or favorite or most personable student that he had is the one that is there trying to figure out like, yo, how do I forget about my sensei? And Gojo telling him like, yo, I expect great things from you, you know what I mean? Like, oh, just thinking about it right now, it hits the emotions and the feels, because Gojo, everybody loved Gojo, Yuji loved Gojo, all of the memories that they shared together from the very beginning of the series. Even thinking back how essentially it started off with, yo, you got pretty much two choices. We could either get rid of you right now, or we could keep you around, and ultimately after we finish this Sukuna situation, then you gotta go. And to realize and recognize that this guy all along was planning on, well, how can I save my student, even if it's at the cost of myself? And that was just so beautifully done in the end, to see their final hoorah together, their final conversation, and Gojo basically hoping for greatness out of his student. It touched the feels. Then cutting on over to the final conversation, which I was shocked that they brought Mahito back for the final chapter. I mean, I get it, he was a fan favorite, he was one of the most popular characters, even if he was a villain back in his run, but we hadn't seen him in so long. So to see Sukuna and Mahito and kind of like this dark void in between life and death, and seeing Sukuna's massive growth in the final hour, because remember, we had the whole scenario just a few chapters beforehand where Sukuna was shown all of Yuji's memories, everything that Yuji went through, and he was like, I'm sorry bruh, it don't move me, G, I'm not feeling nothing. To turn around from that to having a conversation with Mahito and basically kind of reflecting on his own life, and while he's talking to Mahito, it's almost as if he's talking to like a younger version of himself, in the sense of like a wild child, and Mahito is basically kind of calling him out like, let's keep it real, you was all after revenge and whatnot, and if you could do it over, would you even do it over? And it's at that moment where Sukuna realizes like, yo, I had a couple of chances to actually live a normal life, and I decided to go the route I went through, but it seemed as though in the last hour, and possibly due to Yuji's interference those few chapters ago where he showed him his memories and he showed him what a good life could look like, Sukuna's like, yo, I lost, yeah, I'm going to settle down, and he walks off into the void. Honestly, it just felt like that was one of the biggest wins for Yuji Itadori, in terms of not necessarily, you know, the major black flash that finishes the battle, you know, the combat, but more so being able to change one of the most ultimate cursed evils ever, Sukuna. I don't know if Yuji doesn't go through all of that stuff with Sukuna, and Sukuna doesn't see Yuji's memories and spend time with a human that is a decent person, if he actually comes to that that ultimate outcome of saying, nah, I want to settle down, I want to live a normal life. I don't know if he goes that route. And I think pairing him up with Mahito, where Mahito's like, so I'm the only wild child left, is just a better demonstration of how far Sukuna has grown, where while Mahito is still on the BS, Sukuna's like, I'm ready for a better life. It really just helped to showcase the growth in Sukuna. And then the second to last page, it just demonstrated yet again how much Gege Akutami loves some of his characters, and he put some of my favorites on one of the last pages because we get to see 3 different group shots. The top shot is of course Yuta, Maki, Inumaki, and Panda. In the middle we have Hakari and Kirara, and then the final panel on the second to last page, Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara. And again, I gotta stress that I love seeing them smiling and happy. They went through a living nightmare. Megumi lost his body. Yuji had to share his body for a long period of time with a freaking cursed spirit, one of the most evil ones in history. They lost their sensei Gojo. Yuta went through a living nightmare through everything he dealt with. Maki had to go through that whole situation with the Zenin clan and losing her sister. Like, they all went through so much. So for the finale to finally have them have a happy moment, they deserve a happy ending, don't you agree? And then of course the final page, it felt very much so like we're gonna leave open if ever we want to return to the story, because it ends off where the whole little cabin where Sukuna's final finger is sealed, it seems as though a certain amount of time has passed since anybody's been there, and the cabin is kind of like creaked open, the door, and you see Sukuna's finger sitting out there, and that's basically leaving open if they ever wanted to revisit Jujutsu Kaisen, they could easily have this. Somebody broke in, took Sukuna's finger, and started all this madness all over again. Although, if I remember correctly, they were speaking on if that last finger could actually be enough to bring him back, if enough of his spirit could even be in one finger, opposed to how he had many fingers out there back in the beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen. So there's that, but definitely they left open an option. They didn't go the complete same route as like a lot of the predecessor series, where it's like everybody got married and we had one time skip where a few years passed and then another time skip where 10 years passed. Gege didn't go that route, but he left enough wiggle room if he ever did decide to come back to the series. And yeah, this final chapter of Jujutsu Kaisen, was it exactly what fans idealized? Probably not. Was it something that I personally was really satisfied with and happy to see on a positive note this series end off? Yes, I was rocking with this series pretty much since about a year after it came out, since about 2019. So 5 years later, I'd say thank you so much, Gege Akutami, for everything you provided with this series. It was one heck of a ride, and we look forward to your next work. But let me know what you guys thought about the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. How did you feel? What did you think about the final conversation with Gojo and Yuji? How did you feel about Sukuna's resolve? Do you think that that was truly due to Yuji showcasing and demonstrating what it's like to live a good and normal life? And your overall thoughts of the finale of Jujutsu Kaisen? That's all I have for this one. I'm Tim. As always, people, have an awesome day, and subscribe and hit that bell to get more. Thank you so much.
Anybody hear me out there? I need somebody to save me. At times it's hard to say things when it gets hard to face me. Anybody hear me out there? I need somebody to